So let's talk about interviewing. This is probably one of the most commonly used methods for collecting qualitative data, definitely among sociologists as well as a lot of other social science researchers. So why do we do interviews? It helps researchers understand the perspectives, the emotions, and the social context that quantitative methods might overlook. Interviewing is a qualitative research method that gathers data through direct, purposeful, intentional conversations with people, where we are just asking them questions and trying to elicit deeper answers than you could do with a survey. With a survey, you have fixed response options, whereas with an interview, you have open response options. But the advantage of a survey, large sample size, you can detect broad patterns. It's like a mile wide, but it's an inch deep. You can't get at the why questions behind the patterns you see. But with an interview, with the open response format, now you have a lot smaller sample size, so it's not as generalizable, but you can get a lot deeper insights. You can get at the why, not just that a pattern exists. Sometimes they're used in tandem. Maybe you'll do a big survey, 1,000 people, and then interview a subset of them so that you can both establish a broad pattern and then try to elicit some of the deeper mechanisms or reasons that might be behind the pattern that you were able to detect. So what are types of interviews? I'll talk about 4 main types. 3 of them you can view as sort of in a continuum, from structured to semi-structured to unstructured. Let's talk about those 3 first. A structured interview is almost like a survey, just done orally, maybe over the phone, or somebody has got a clipboard, follows a strict script, asks the exact same questions, worded the same, in the same order. Now, why would you want something this strict when I just said one of the main benefits of interviewing is that you can get deeper, open-ended responses? Well, a structured interview does have some purpose, sometimes when it's super helpful. One, maybe you're doing a comparative study and you want consistency between the comparative sites. You want to make sure the questions were asked exactly the same, that there's not some bias in the way questions were worded. Maybe you're comparing 2 different companies or somebody at a sort of before and after, like a longitudinal way, and you want to make sure that you're asking exactly the same things. Maybe you have an interview team, and so you want to make sure that no matter who the interviewer is, they're doing the interviews in a very similar way. I've had undergraduate research assistants, and I used structured interviews when I was having them interview people. For example, a question might be, a customer satisfaction survey in healthcare, and there's a question like, on a scale from 1 to 10, how would you rate your experience? And then they give a number. You could ask why as well, but these tend to be almost survey-ish, just done in an interview format. Then we move to semi-structured. This is what I tend to do with most of my interviews. It's flexible yet guided. You have a list of questions, and those are set, but there's room for follow-ups. You're trying to prompt them with additional ways of getting at deeper context for things. So it's best for understanding experiences while ensuring some consistency. For example, maybe you're studying the career paths of first-generation college students. You might ask, what challenges have you faced? And then you can ask, can you give an example as they talk? If there's something interesting, you can keep pursuing that, but then move back to the next question. So it balances standardization with adaptability. It's got a good blend of both. Lastly, we have unstructured interviews. These are very conversational and open-ended. You have no fixed questions. You just have a series of topics you want to get deep into conversation about. And the interview is largely guided by the participants' responses. So it's best for exploratory research or trying to understand complex personal experiences. Sometimes they can be very long. Usually it's a very small sample size. Maybe you're, for example, studying cultural identity in immigrant families. And you start with saying something like, hey, tell me about your journey. It's super open-ended. It can go a lot of different directions. Now, the challenge is the data, the transcript you end up with is a lot harder to analyze. It takes really good coding skills. It also requires really strong interviewer skills. You have to be able to develop rapport and probe to really make sure you're getting these deeper insights. So those are the 3 that are on a continuum: structured, semi-structured, and unstructured. The last type I want to mention is focus groups. These are interviews, but they're group discussions. They involve multiple participants engaging in a discussion. They're best for understanding collective opinions, different social dynamics, group interactions. If part of what you're trying to study is the way people interact with each other, maybe you have couples in there and you want to see how different couples talk when they're, around each other. Or maybe you're studying, politics. And so you've got some Republicans and some Democrats, and you're asking them questions about policy and want to see how they interact. People who are more shy, sometimes in a focus group, after someone else has broken the ice, they can be a little more talkative. If the group size is too big, some people shut down. Most focus groups are half a dozen people, give or take a few. You can get responses from multiple people quicker, because you can do one focus group with a handful of people in almost the same amount of time as one interview with one person. It does take some time to set up and organize, and usually need a second person there that's taking notes so that you can focus on asking questions and being engaged in the group dynamic. An example might be reactions to new product designs and marketing research. This is done a lot at companies where they'll do focus groups around products to get feedback. So the challenge, some voices may dominate. Some people are a lot more talkative than others, and it requires quite a bit more skill to moderate. Now, lastly, let's talk about a few key principles in writing good interview questions. So one, you want to use open-ended questions. Generally, if it's super structured, the interview, then maybe, you have a scale or something, but generally you want open-ended questions. For example, if you said, did you feel supported in college? Yes or no? That's not a great wording because they'll just give you a yes/no answer. You want to get a little deeper. So maybe you'd reword that. Can you describe a time when you felt supported in college? Right? This invites the participant to share a story rather than just confirming information. So use open-ended questions. Avoid leading questions. You want to prevent bias and skewed responses by the way you word things. So you would not say, for example, don't you think social media is harmful? Right? It assumes a kind of negative. Instead, you'd say, how has social media influenced your daily life? This more neutral phrasing ensures an honest, more unbiased response. Third, use probing questions that dig deeper into responses. For example, if the participant says, it was a tough semester, even if it's not on your script, you can still probe. And the interviewer could say, what made it particularly challenging? Or, oh, that's interesting. Tell me more about that. Interviewers can probe with forms of just engaged conversation, paying attention, eye contact, like, oh, wow, tell me more. Oh, that must have been hard. Can you unpack that for me? Can you paint that picture a little deeper? This helps clarify vague answers and uncover richer details. Focus on experiences and processes, the how and why, instead of just the what. So you wouldn't want to ask, for example, did you use campus resources? Instead, you would word that, how did you decide which college resources to use? You're getting at the process, the experience, what they did, and not just, again, the yes, no. But it's not simply that they did something, it's why'd you do it, how'd you do it. You're trying to get at the social dynamics. Lastly, sequence your questions effectively. You want to build trust and rapport before getting into more personal topics. Plus, a participant can stop the interview at any time. You don't want to lead with some of your most challenging questions or personal questions. If there's something that might make them uncomfortable, there's a greater chance that they'll finish the interview if they've already invested time. Start with a warm-up question, then ask more neutral questions, and if you have sensitive ones, put those at the end. For example, tell me about your academic background. What's your major, and how did you pick that? Then you get more specific. So what barriers have you faced as a first-generation student? This warm-up builds rapport and comfort before you dive into deeper discussions. Even some demographics, some people aren't super comfortable answering. If you're asking somebody their age or their income, you don't know what will make some people uncomfortable, but it's best to arrange your questions starting from more rapport building, easy ones, neutral, and then more into your more sensitive ones at the end. Thanks.